Hello, my name is Andy and I am the Village Idiot. I'm armed with a car and a GoPro and an unhealthy amount of time on my hands. I'm using that time to attempt to visit every civil parish in England. You're watching the East Riding of Yorkshire series. Together with the unparished city of Hull, it forms the county of the same name. There's 172 parishes here. Which one are we in today? Welcome back to the East Riding of Yorkshire again, everybody. Now, we're beginning this episode in a place called Haisthorpe, which is not the name of this parish. I'll get to that in a second. And we're beginning right at the end of the road. It's a dead-end hamlet, is Haisthorpe. And you can see there's a railway line at the very far end here. Now, this railway line is very interesting, and we will be talking about it during the course of this episode, but it's what's on the other side of this railway line that's even more interesting. Can you see that over there? There's an industrial estate. Well, that's built on a former RAF base, and that RAF base belonged to Carnaby. Here's my disclaimer for people who may be watching me for the first time. I say things as I would in my native accent and dialect. As a result, I may not pronounce things in the same way as the locals do. Remember, I'm a visitor. It's impossible to know everything. Leave me a comment, spin me a like, and bash that subscribe button. Let's get to today's parish video. Carnaby, Cairn village. Welcome back to the outskirts of Bridlington, folks. This week we're in the parish of Carnaby, not far from the seaside town itself. Located almost on the coast, Carnaby is just a couple of miles away from the stunning Bridlington Bay, and part of the parish actually runs down the Yorkshire shoreline, encapsulating the tiny hamlet of Wilsthorpe. Also within the boundaries is Haisthorpe, between the main village and Burton Agnes. Carnaby is known mainly for three things. First of all, during World War II, it was one of only 3 places along the English coastline that had a specific type of airfield. Carnaby Aerodrome, or RAF Carnaby, was designed differently to your standard airbase, but there was a good reason why. The airfield would eventually become an industrial estate, and that brings us to the second thing. On the edge of the former airfield is the John Bull World of Rock factory, which attracts people from far and wide thanks to its tours. Third is a folly that stands in a field to the north of the village. It won't feature in this episode, you'll have to wait for Boynton to see it, but its official name is Carnaby Temple. Locally though, it's known as the Pepper Pot. Carnaby has plenty more, so come on folks, it's another East Riding adventure. Let's see where this one will take us. We start in the hamlet of Haisthorpe, located to the west of Carnaby. This, along with Wilsthorpe on the coast, falls within the parish boundaries. Its main street runs for around a quarter of a mile or so between the A614 and the railway line where we started. Originally, it was spelt with a Y as opposed to an I, and without an E on the end. Landmarks-wise, it has a couple. The level crossing where we began is one of them. It's one of only a handful left in the UK that's operated using a telephone and whistle boards. To the north of the A614, there are 2 other landmarks. Pictured here is Waldgate Chapel, originally built for the Primitive Methodists in 1888. North of that is Haisthorpe Hall, a Grade 2 listed property dating from the 18th century. With Haisthorpe behind us, let's continue on into Carnaby. Before we go for a walk though, we have to cover its former RAF base. It wasn't exactly your normal airfield, that's for sure. So if that's the case, what exactly was it that we could see from the railway crossing? Let's go and find out. RAF Carnaby was a special type of airfield designed in a very different way to those we usually see. It had one single runway 5 times the width of a standard one, and it was 9,000 feet long. It was also opened quite late during World War II, March 1944. Its purpose was simple. It was built to provide crippled bombers returning from raids with a safe place to land. A total of 3 were constructed along the English coast. All 3 were built in exactly the same way. At the end of the runway there were 3 lanes, 2 under air traffic control and 1 for emergencies, meaning aircraft could use it without first making contact. Carnaby had a secret installation known as FIDO, Fog Investigation and Dispersal Operation. It was a series of pipelines along the runway into which fuel was pumped and set alight, creating sufficient heat to burn a hole through fog. This allowed pilots to make a safe landing. Now, as Carnaby Industrial Estate, it's become famous for something else. As you turn into it from Bridlington Bay Road, you cannot miss the John Bull World of Rock factory. This manufactures all the sweet treats we've had at the Seaside, including rock, chocolate and nugget. This is a working factory, but it's also a tourist attraction. You can book a tour of the factory on which you're treated to the history of the area's premier confectioners, told by John Bull's ancestors. You also learn the secret of how they put the letters inside rock, and you can even make your own personalised stick. How cool is that? Is anyone hungry yet? Okay, we're here after a bit of a marathon trying to find my way around Carnaby. It's one of those places where if you don't know it very well, you will struggle to sort of find where you're going, because there's lots of tight, twisty little lanes. They're very narrow, and yeah, the map is certainly required out here. I'll tell you something, I'm going to put my boots on for this walk as well, because there are plenty of icy patches around this time of year. It happens. So our start point is here outside the church. There it is. The tower, you can just about see it, and there's trees kind of obscuring it, but there we are. There is Carnaby's church. We'll start with this and then we'll walk around the rest of the village and see what it's all about. Carnaby's church is dedicated to St John the Baptist. It's built mainly of stone, but it has some flint and cobble thrown in too. Some parts have been rebuilt with brick. It consists of a chancel, nave, south aisle and west tower. The earliest existing fabric, the south aisle, the aisle arcade and the tower arch, originate from the 13th century, although a Norman font survives from an earlier building. The 3-stage tower, topped by an embattled parapet, was built in the 15th century. The whole church was restored in around 1680 and again in 1719. Now we're following Church Lane into the village. I would imagine that even though Carnaby is well known thanks to being on the road to Bridlington, not many people explore these narrow, twisty streets. Carnaby is partially on a hill, and a steep one at that. After all, we are still on the East Yorkshire Wolds, just. These lanes are all residential. Most of Carnaby's modest facilities are located on the A165. One thing this place lacks is a village hall. The locals made up for that by using Waldgate Chapel, but it closed in 2020 and was later sold at auction. At the bottom of School Hill you'll find this cross. It's a modern reconstruction of a medieval market stone, and it was erected in 1968. This icy looking hill did indeed once have a school, as its name suggests. It was built in 1871, but by the 1960s a steady decline in the number of children attending it meant it closed in 1967. Carnaby has no school at all these days. Now we're at the top of the hill, and here we come to an unusual landmark for such a small place. This looks like a series of private garages, but it is in fact Carnaby Fire Station. In total, Carnaby has about 60 houses, so it's small. It doesn't really have much in the way of new builds either. It's managed to avoid any serious development for decades, but honestly, how many houses could you theoretically build on a narrow road like Temple Lane anyway? At the end of this road we hit the A165, the main road into Bridlington. Carnaby is certainly not a quiet village. This is busy because from Bridlington, traffic heading for both Hull and York use this before it forks at a roundabout, depending on which city it's heading for. There are no pubs in the village, not anymore at least, but Fern's Farm comes pretty close. This is one of 2 properties in Carnaby which have been turned into hotels. Fern's Farm was originally a 19th century farmhouse which still maintains its old-fashioned charm. Farming was at one time Carnaby's main economy. These days it's all about tourism. Loads of people come here to stay during the summer months because it's within easy reach of the sea. Some get there by bus. Carnaby is served by the number 121, which you can catch at this bus stop here. Now for a left turn along Moor Lane. No access to landfill site, says this sign. Correct. Moor Lane is a dead end. On the corner where it meets the A165 is a building which screamed the words "Old Pub" at me. Couldn't find anything about it, but what do you reckon? Am I right? Trades-wise, there were lime burners and brickmakers in the village in the 19th century. It also had both a windmill and a watermill too at one time, but we're talking mid-1500s for those. That landfill site, by the way, if you're wondering, is on Bridlington Bay Road, near the John Bull Rock Factory. As you approach the end of Moor Lane, the houses start to diminish and soon you can see the railway line in the distance. Once again, this line is a familiar one to us. It's the one from Scarborough to Hull. Like its near neighbours Burton Agnes and Wilsthorpe, Carnaby used to have a railway station until 1970. The station buildings still stand, but they're now private houses. Carnaby Station still has its old platforms and they are clearly visible from the end of Moor Lane. Although it's a dead end, we can use a short linkway here that takes us onto Bridlington Bay Road. Carnaby Level Crossing has traffic cameras. That makes this the first one I've come across in the East Riding that does. It definitely needs them though, because this one doesn't have full barriers. They weren't down long before a train came hurtling past. Bridlington Bay Road's main feature would be Little Eden. That's a country park, whose main selling point is its collection of log cabins and private hot tubs. It's pet friendly, sports both boating and fishing lakes, and it's not far from the sea. No wonder then that Carnaby is a tourist magnet. Bridlington Bay Road is a continuation of the A165 which turns southeast after leaving the village and heads directly towards the sea. This roundabout marks the northern endpoint of the A614, a road, remember, which begins in the Nottingham suburb of Arnold. Turning right here brings us to Manor Court. This is the second of the two former working farms that have become hotels. You can of course stay in the main building, but Manor Court has an array of glamping pods as well. Carnaby truly does have it all for the modern holidaymaker. Leaving Manor Court behind, we're now making our way back towards the village centre and to perhaps the most striking landmark of the lot. I'll give you a hint, it's not Turkey Lane. Quite how this one managed to get its name is beyond me, but I'll not gobble on about it. The centre of the village is marked by a small green upon which is an old water pump, nicely restored and looking fabulous. However, we're here to see the enormous Carnaby Airfield Memorial, which recognises the vital role that the village had to play in World War II. This was created by the artist Stephen Carville, the man behind Bridlington's Gansey Girl sculpture. It depicts a historical scene that happened at Carnaby in April 1945. The story concerns a Halifax bomber from No. 58 Squadron that was damaged off the Norwegian coastline. Crew member Sergeant Frank Smith fell through a 12-foot hole in the fuselage and was presumed missing. The aircraft, piloted by Flight Lieutenant Lawson, made it back to the UK, landing at Carnaby thanks to Fido. Upon disembarking, Sergeant Smith was found under the aircraft. Smith had been saved by the D-ring on his harness and had spent 3 hours dangling perilously over the cold, icy North Sea while the aircraft had limped back home. He later made a full recovery. What a fabulous and heroic tale, only made possible by the existence of RAF Carnaby. It really was a vital piece of infrastructure during the war. I think it's fair to say, after learning that, this little village is more than just one of those places you pass through to reach somewhere else. It's well worth coming to explore, and I thoroughly enjoyed this walk. Well, mostly. Okay, we are all the way around Carnaby. I only fell over once on the ice, but don't worry, I'm okay. It's all good, it's all good. Hurt for about a minute, but nothing I can't handle. It's happened before. Okay, so now we're going to head out into Bridlington Bay to begin the next episode. Hope you're ready to see the sea. It's going to be chilly on that seafront next week. Speaking of the seafront, Carnaby does have a second hamlet within its boundaries, Wilsthorpe. It's made up of no more than about 10 buildings, all situated up a private road, hence why I couldn't physically go to it. Wilsthorpe's main landmark is to do with the Royal Yorkshire Yacht Club's dinghy section. The yacht club was established in 1847 by Hull businessmen and ship owners. It was originally based in both Hull and Whitby and staged 2 annual regattas from its inception. Its royal patronage began with Queen Victoria. By the turn of the 20th century, increasing traffic on the Humber made that area less suitable for pleasure yachting, and in 1939 the club moved to Bridlington. The dinghy section operates both catamarans and monohulls. These are beach-launched from the site, known as Blythe Park. The club hold a number of open events each year, including the long-distance Hornsea Race, which covers 22 miles, and the annual Dinghy Regatta, nowadays an informal members' weekend held over the August bank holiday. And folks, that's it for Carnaby. Time to head down Bridlington Bay Road towards the North Sea yet again. Next time I see you up here, we'll be in a place that has loads of ancient history, but also a massive beach with some fabulous views across the waves towards Flamborough Head and Bridlington. I'll see you on the sand. Thanks for watching this video, folks. Don't forget to like this episode if you haven't already. It really makes a difference with YouTube. If you're new here, subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, and give us a share too if you've got friends who'd like it. You can find all the links to my social media accounts below, as well as my Buy Me a Coffee page where you can donate to the channel. Also, if you've enjoyed this episode, have a look at some more videos in this series. Until next time, I've been Andy, also known as the Village Idiot, and I'm out.